Welcome to the Hospitality Maverick podcast with me, Michael Tingsær. We at Hospitality Mavericks are here to inspire leaders to create heart-centered and profitable businesses from the inside out, the kind that both employees and customers love and support. Thanks to BizSimply for sponsoring this episode as our show partner. And BizSimply is the all-in-one HR, workforce management, rota and operations software designed and built by hospitality experts to make every shift run like clockwork. And we join forces to help the industry to find new ways to become even more innovative in how we lead our people, how we operate, to how we grow our businesses, to how we serve our customers. Together we want to share strategies and tools that can make the industry thrive long term, not just survive.
We need to assess who we are as human beings and actually what angle are we coming from and everything that we do, and then start from there and go again. And it's fine to do that after 30 years of being in business. Like, it doesn't need to be a spotty 18-year-old coming in doing that. You need to, in many ways, you can't when you're that age. So actually having a bit of mileage on the clock really helps you have a proper introspection of who you are and reflection on how you can move forward as a better human being.
This is Roland Horne, founder and CEO of WatchHouse, a specialty coffee chain in central London. And they are on a journey not just to achieve great business results, but also make a positive impact on people, communities, and the planet. Roland shares his journey into entrepreneurship and coffee, and you will learn from this conversation that he entered hospitality because he was a disgruntled customer. And we talk about their approach to growth and taking in investment without compromising on the purpose, the challenges of the staffing crisis, and how they have now built an employee experience that reflect their purpose and culture, from when people onboard to they have training to they manage on a daily level. The whole goal with this is to aspire to be the best in class. We also talk OKRs, stepping back to see the big picture, how to use difficult times to be proactive, becoming a B Corp, and much more. Before you tune in, please sign up for a weekly newsletter packed with more Maverick insights, strategies, and tools. Find a link in the show notes or visit hospitalitymavericks.com. If you are a founder or CEO, grab your coffee, pen, and notebook. There will be lots of ideas and insights in this conversation on how to build a business that gives more than it takes. Enjoy. Could you, for people out there, just give your elevator pitch on who you are, your background, and also how you came around to build a little coffee chain?
Sure. Okay, elevator pitch, 30 seconds. So I'm Roland Horne. I'm the CEO and founder of WatchHouse Coffee, which is a specialty coffee brand here in central London. Great to be here. Definitely great to be back in the flesh and bone after COVID. So fundamentally our business is one in which we position ourselves to be the go-to local hero of choice within specialty scene within central London. It's a tall order to achieve that, but we're definitely making inroads into that as the business grows. I'm Irish originally, contrary to my accent. I moved here when I was quite young, and to a sort of a scrappy part of the Midlands here in the UK, and kind of taught me to be quite to have dexterity and to, in some ways, I think, to sort of have a more holistic approach towards life. And it wasn't the easiest of childhoods, but certainly wasn't the hardest either. But I think coming down to London here to study for my degrees, I sort of started my first startup here when I was finishing my undergraduate degree in aquarium design. So kind of got into sort of high-end architecture, again taking very holistic approaches towards what I was doing at the time, which effectively was installing big, expensive aquariums in people's homes, principally very high net worth individuals. So you learn negotiation, you learn about consideration, and things that you need in business, such as contracts and understanding of law and accounting, etc. And all those things that you kind of come as second nature now. But so this is a long elevator we're in, but it's broken down on the high floor. So fundamentally, after aquariums, I then transitioned into property, whilst also then giving an opportunity to then enter specialty. And I came to it as a frustrated customer. I've said it quite a few times, but it's very much the truth. I found that the lack of empathy within the hospitality scene at that time, this is back in sort of 2010, 11, at the time when I was sort of getting more aware of hospitality within London. I found that there was a lack of empathy and a sort of a chain rollout, cookie cutter, all for the, ultimately, I hate to say it, but for the money men in this world. And so I wanted to do something that was sort of best in class within my space, squaring off some of those edges and, or I should say, rounding off some of those edges, I should say, to make sure that we could have a truly great experience. And so WatchHouse was established, or we like to say re-established in 2014. The building's from 1829, so we feel like we've re-established the building into 2014. I did originally run into it with a partner, but he dropped out prior to us actually commencing the work. And so I went from being sleepy investor, to actually being an active day-to-day partner. And as I say, WatchHouse was established in 2014. And yeah, we've now grown the business from one site in 2014. I was referred to them as houses. Now over to 9 trading houses, vertically integrated roastery. And we've got 3 other houses that are currently under construction on site here in central London, and another half a dozen or so in legals or under offer stage as we scale the business. So yeah.
So it's full speed on, you can say, in the post-pandemic world, if we dare to say that. Could you tell us a bit more about, because what really made us click and talk was all about, I mentioned in the intro as well, the purpose, the mission, the vision and the mission, and you already allured to a bit that there must be a better way.
Yeah, I think it's been said a few times from a few American academics, principally, about the Great Reassessment, rather than the Great Resignation, as it were, since the pandemic. And I'm not going to sit here today and talk too much about the pandemic, but what I would say to you is in relation to ultimately our, as we refer to them, the pillars of our business and what we're here for, is that the pandemic gave us that opportunity to really genuinely reassess what we were about. And I think what's super interesting is that if you go into business, you can go in with a sort of a frustration, which is my entrance into the business and into the sector. But actually, having that ability to have really good critical analysis of really what you're doing to the very basic level, and not focusing on operations, because I think people tend to do that. You kind of go with what you can touch and feel. Really, to start thinking about ultimately the culture and the people within the business. And I've said it openly, and I'm a transparent person. We didn't really do that at WatchHouse prior to the pandemic. We did have a best-in-class mentality and mantra within the business, and we wanted to be better. And I think if you asked any of my colleagues at WatchHouse, they would say that my vision as the primary owner of our business, and maybe we'll come on to investment later on, but the primary vision of me was to be best in class and to solve some of the externalities and the problems that we saw when I entered the market. But not having that ability or maybe necessity to really sit back and think about what you're doing. And I think I was probably quite cynical to the whole notion. I remember when I was graduating from university and people were always talking about, you'd see, big blue chip companies saying, people are the most important thing to our business. And I remember always being super cynical about it, thinking, of course it is. Like, your bottom line is the most important thing. And I think I was hugely ignorant, actually, because whilst there probably is a bit of healthy cynicism needed for those big statements you see on websites, the reality is that the people for us at our business are absolutely not only the way we get to what we want to do as a business, but it's also the funnest and the best part of our business. It's possibly the most challenging as well. It's not like it's super easy to manage. We've got 220 or so people at our business now, and it is difficult managing aspirations, but it's also hugely rewarding. So I think the COVID situation allowed us to have the great reassessment really of our business, and we really honed in on our ultimately what our mission vision really was for the business, which has to be said is still being evolved as we go through our growth.
And how do you bring that to life? Because what was really interesting, you got people around the table during the pandemic, because you had that time to reassess. And I can remember when we had a video call, you just said we're just taking everything down from like the big reassessment, as we call it that. Can you talk a bit about that process and what you learned from that as the CEO founder? Because you've been in the business for almost 7-8 years now.
7-8 years, I mean, it was truly. It was. There's two stories here. There's my story, which I will give you as much as you want to hear about, and there's also the story of the business. And I think what I founded WatchHouse. I am the founder of the business, but very soon after I founded it, I brought an operations director in at that time as a barista, Steph Gregg, who's now on maternity leave for the next year, and she was effectively my co-founder, and she is one of life's beautiful people, and I have historically been the so-called bad cop of that relationship in terms of getting deals done and being a bit more commercial and making sure that the necessary friction of business is undertaken in a successful way, whilst also being true to our morals and what we stand for. But ultimately, business is about an element of healthy conflict, and at times you need to be able to be there for that. So Steph and I very much fell into a yin and yang situation, but actually with Steph moving into a fantastic part of her life. I'm a father of 3. I know how amazing it is to have children. It allowed me an opportunity and sort of headspace actually to go, right, I need to be yin and yang here in this situation culturally for our business. How do I do that? And we hired somebody who came to us from a blitzscaling tech firm in the UK, who came actually as a marketing director in an interim capacity. She was introduced actually by one of our angel investors, and her name was Olivia. She's fantastic, and she came and sort of brought the objectives and key results framework, OKRs as they're referred to, and really sort of we spent hours and hours and hours sitting inside a skyscraper in central London. We built a site in St Mary's Axe, and part of that deal was we got opportunities to sit upstairs in the sort of big lounges and talk about stuff, and FOC as it were. And so we sort of had these ideation sessions up in these areas, and sort of sitting there talking about what matters to us. And so we developed our OKR framework and really what the pillars of our business were, and we introduced profit into that conversation. I think the notion of motivating profit is really important ultimately to everything we wanted to do. Passionate people, and that was ultimately the first thing that we reassessed and said, right, that's our first thing that we're going to focus on, and that's the business. Premium product was the third, and exceptional places was the final. So those 4 pillars were significant, and they were established during this period of assessment during COVID. I brought people in. I've leveraged and lent on people who have been who complement my areas of weakness, and they've done the same to me. So it's been a really great, challenging, emotional at times. We've had tears during that process of sort of reflecting. I think it led me to go off and go back to school. So I'm off now doing an MBA, an exec MBA, sort of trying to learn more about the vocational parts of business and culture. It makes you question whether you're a good person, I think, in truth, which I think is a healthy thing for anyone to do as well, and what you've done good at and what you can do better at. So it's been a healthy but challenging time, but we've come out of it now with a framework where something that we can build upon as a business as we scale. And as I say, with 220 or so colleagues, this is a challenging thing, right? You've got to bring people into a culture and that best in class is fine as a North Star, but it's not enough. So it's something that we are grappling with, and we don't always get it right. We've lost some great people along the way who have gone elsewhere, and we've obviously looked at ourselves and how we can improve there. But I think we've got in the pandemic as well. We've got 2 now of the top 10 baristas in the world who competed at the World Coffee Championships in Milan. We've got at the time of speaking to you, we've had 3 people also competing in Coffee Masters, 3 out of 16 in the world, which is really amazing. And we've got another 2 people who are competing for the UK Barista Championships coming up soon in our business. So, coming from a 266 square foot small site in 2014 with no real knowledge of specialty to having been surrounded by people like that says a lot about the sort of the vision of being best in class within our business.
It's very interesting. You talk about this journey of growth. You mentioned that a couple of times, and we need to, make sure growth and vision, mission, purpose goes hand in hand, and the framework is built to take care of that growth. So what is your approach to growth, and also, because you need funding for that, I guess, and and you talk about you had angel investors, so it's not like you don't take investment in to make a good business or better business. Can you talk a bit about that and what your experience has been with that over the years?
Because I've founded a total of 4 businesses now in my life, I've always sort of seeded them myself. First thing I want to say is that the notion of money in business, particularly within specialty coffee, and actually with hospitality generally, has been bastardized, right? Like there's just so many examples of people doing things to get in, to get out, private equity money, ramping things up and then dumping it and all sorts of stuff. And it's not going to go away. That's the nature of the beast. But I do think there are not enough examples of successful, positive environments where businesses such as ours have taken investment from decent human beings that happen to be venture capitalists or work in private equity. Not everybody is out to try and sell you up the road. There are a lot of those type of characters as well, of course, but I think there's not enough examples of a positive impact in the VC space. So I think WatchHouse, as I say, I started all the rest of my businesses myself and seeded them as I did with WatchHouse, and I think we had first site 2014, second site 2016. I took a sabbatical in 2015 to go off and tour various coffee places in the world and get loads of inspiration and take a bit of a break, because I started my first business at university, so I hadn't really done all that whole gap year or whatever they say. So 2016 we opened our second site, 2017 we opened up our third site, and in 2018 we were then approached by an American conglomerate who many people know here in the UK that went and offered me quite a big 7-figure cash buyout to sell the business to them. This is in 2018, and I vividly remember it was sort of late November 2018, and there wasn't a moment of like absolutely not. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's someone offers you a big financial incentive for something you do consider. Of course you do, we're human. And so I thought about it for a few weeks and then thought this doesn't feel right to me. There was something about it that just wasn't right. So I remember ringing at our Christmas party a couple of weeks into December and just ringing the owner and said no. I got quite a lot of expletives back on the phone from him. They've subsequently now gone into administration and basically disappeared out of the scene, and I have to say I'm thankful for that, because I think they were in this game for the wrong reason. So we then 2018 said no to a big 7-figure purchase, and then it got to 2019 and it was like, right, okay, I need to now if I'm going to turn down something like that, I need to really step on the gas and really do something significant. And I think around that time we had our first child, and I sort of came to the realization sort of mortality and all those things were, we're all racing to the grave is the truth to a certain degree. And I think really what I wanted to do was press on and do something significant. And so we did take an investment. We went and spoke to a couple of people, and we did a deal with a small venture capital firm called Addition Capital here in central London. 4 young, really nice partners. 3 young partners, one of them slightly older. Paul won't mind me saying that, hopefully. But really young outfit. They'd only been around for a couple of years, and they backed a couple of people. They just were really good. Like, they just met them, liked them immediately, was like, these are good humans. And we did the deal. So we raised about just over £2 million in 2019 July, and then we bought. We invested in our roastery, vertically integrated during that period. So we went and bought our roastery from a German roaster called Bonanza, who many people will know. And we then also acquired Fernandez and Wells, the sites that Fernandez and Wells was an operator here in central London the owner was basically retiring, and so we acquired that and reopened up WatchHouse and Somerset House in February 20, and then the pandemic hit. And just prior to the pandemic hitting, Addition Capital came in again for another £1 million on an up valuation. And so we were very capitalised going into COVID. We just obviously opened up the Somerset House, WatchHouse, and yeah, we kind of sort of went into it quite in quite a bullish manner, I guess, fundamentally. I know we don't want to hark on about pandemic too much on this podcast today, but I think if I was to sort of categorize or summarize my approach during the 18 months, call it, of the pandemic, it was basically be quite bullish in the first third, because I felt that September 2020 would be the end of COVID, and there's going to be some great opportunities, and landlords were freaking out, and we got some great deals on offer to us, and so we were snapping up all sorts of opportunities and turnover deals, capex deals from landlords, etc. Of course, then to September 20 coming, and then it kind of went to like October, and suddenly you're facing another situation of a rise. And then there was my partner's actually a pharmacist, so she was kind of like, listen, you need to understand there may never be a vaccination for this. And at that point it was like, geez, like, are we going to be living with this face mask and stuff all the rest of our lives? So then it went quite bearish internally in terms of my outlook. And I say internally, what I mean is me personally during this period. The business carried on working on these processes. And then the final third was back to sort of not as bearish as bullish as the first third, but it was definitely back into the right. Let's crack on, do some great stuff. So yeah, then we opened up a couple of more sites during lockdown. We opened up our roastery properly in August 2020. And we actually didn't make any of our staff redundant throughout that period, and we actually built our head office cost. So the orthodoxy in London at that time was drop everything you're doing, don't pay anybody, sack all your staff, don't do any capex expenditure, just don't do anything because you don't know what's happening. And I understand people do that. We were lucky because our cost base was quite small, so we were obviously capitalised well. So it was like, right, actually let's swim against the tide, and I think it served us really well.
And you mentioned that's really interesting overview about the way you look at growth and how you fund it, but also how you approach the pandemic, where you swim against the tide. You do the counterintuitive. When it comes to culture, you already mentioned that that's something that's very, very important for you guys, and you said yourself, like, there's been a lot of learning for me as well, and I'm still educating myself to become a better CEO/founder. Can you talk a bit about how you actually build culture and how you manage culture? Because that's a beast, as you say. It's probably the most, when you get it right, the most exciting things and most giving things. Yeah. But when it's challenging, which is for many, many people, it's not always easy, even though it looks like from the outside they're just on top of this. They're just doing it.
I think the way we dealt with culture, I do think that I'm a decent human being. I think I see other human beings who I think are also decent people, and therefore I tend to hire and work with those people. And I think that's served me well from the moment Steph Gregg walked through our door to the moment that we hired our head of people, Jess Davis, who's been a great hire for us in terms of sort of a spiritual energy towards, I guess a sort of a really strong culture within our business. To being open to the OKRs, to be self-reflective about who I am as a human being as well, and the MBA, for example, as well. So I think the point fundamentally has been about hiring great people, being really honest with yourself about what your culture isn't and is. But I think we need to move forward, not always sort of rub our backs. Like, fundamentally, it's about assessing that you're not good at what you're doing and or not as good as you could be, and really working hard at making that better. So during the period of the cultural side, it was, again, I'm full transparency here with you. Like, I found it hard with trust. Like, I think it's, I like to feel that people are together and they're cracking on, and there's like an element of amazing friction and conflict within a workplace, creatively as well. Like, I just like people being with each other, and so like this notion of like everyone disappear and be at home at Zoom, and it was hard for me because I was kind of like, actually, hold on, what are people doing here? Like, oh, that phone call's not been answered, what are they up to? All that kind of stuff. And so there was a real kind of reflection about trust, really, for me personally. And I think, as I said to you before, sort of leveraging people within our business and sort of leaning on them and learning from them about other elements of where I'm good, they learn from me, and when I'm not, the other way around. So So I think really fundamentally it was about really reassessing what I was doing culturally within our business and trying to learn from people around me about the best way to orientate it. I hope I'm not being too harsh on myself here, but I think it's important to be honest about the fact that it was a hard cultural piece for me personally as well as for the business, but I think we've come out of it in an exceptional place.
Yeah, and I think you're right, because culture comes from the way you lead the business and it reflects the way you are. And what about, like, you talk about this growth curve you're on now. Do you see growth like could be an enemy of that good culture you built now? And are you scared of that? But you need to do it, but you also need to balance that out with the culture and the purpose. All these three things go hand in hand.
Absolutely. I think it's one of the sort of the other half of the coin to a certain degree about taking private equity or venture capital money. There's also this notion that as you grow, you become mediocre, and the special sauce that you had or the energy that you had kind of gets diluted, and then it becomes this big chain, and then it all dies and disappears, right? And it does scare me, because I do think that if you just look at pure on a risk-adjusted basis, like your business vis-a-vis what other people have done in the past, you'd have to say that the correlation there is quite... there's an obvious correlation there, like you can't deny it. So the history suggests that as businesses grow, they get poorer. I think I'm very happy to sort of shed light on competitors or people in the business that we see as aspirational. I do think that James Freeman from Blue Bottle, listening to a podcast from him during lockdown, actually talking about their mantra about as they grow, they want to be better. And I think what's interesting is in the UK hospitality scene, there is this notion of, well, as we grow, we'll be as good as we were for our first site. Well, his view is actually, as we grow, we'll be better than the site in the Bay Area that he started in 2002 or 3, I forget the year it was now. So I think this notion of being better as you get in bigger is actually really important, and I think it's something that the instruments available to you, the opportunities available to you to bring in a head of people to look at your culture and how to run your people systems within your business, or to bring in a creative director who's going to look at the creative side of your business. All those things that when you are a smaller operator, yes, you have the magic, you have the authenticity, which is the key source as far as I'm concerned in anything and everything. But I think that what you don't have is the opportunity to really double click on things that take a lot of resource and time. And actually, as you get bigger, you get more opportunity to sort of, have someone look at what's the best way to do frozen coffee, which is what we're about to launch in one of our sites in the West End and just off Mayfair, off Bond Street. Like how are we looking at waste and sustainability within our business? Our food, like how are we developing that? Well, we've got an opportunity to have a development chef now that actually works for us full time, and so there's all these amazing opportunities that you have as you grow. And I just think as long as you keep clear and your mission is very, very, very clear, there's an opportunity to be much, much better than you were in 2014, opening up in a former church building, and I think that's an interesting thing for us to focus on as we grow.
You talked about the people system to support the culture. Can you talk a bit about what you have done to make your people journey unique?
Yeah, I think I won't recount the names of the businesses, but I was in New York, and I've said one of them already, which is Blue Bottle. And there was another brand that I went and just was walking around. This was back in 2017, actually. And we were I was wandering around doing a bit of a recce and just cruising around New York, because why don't, everyone wants to do that. And I went to this brand and I spoke to a barista who was there, and he was Australian, and I had a chat with him. And obviously being Aussie in New York, and obviously I was British sounding in New York, we had a bit of a chat and stuff. I said, how's the culture? How are you getting on? He said, oh, well, they handed me a apron yesterday, and this is my second day on in the business. And the space was just run badly. Yeah, it was doing trade. It had a bit of uniqueness because it was a brand which wasn't the typical American brand, and therefore they had a semi-successful model. But then I went to Blue Bottle and you walked into the space, and there was this kind of just this energy in the space from the staff that was just a bit special. So I similarly got chatting to one of the baristas there on the side, and I said, listen, tell me about what's your culture like? Do you get handed an apron on day 2 or day 1, and then you're working from day 2 onwards? And, oh no, absolutely not. No, we go through a full-blown induction process off the tools for a minimum of a week at that time. They get a full immersion into the business, and therefore culturally they start off from a really strong and great space. Now, this is back in 2017. We were a much smaller business, 3 sites, just about to open our 3rd site. We hadn't had any investment. We were kind of very much hand-to-mouth kind of operation. And I think then at that point I was like, right, when we get to the point where we can do this, which ultimately should have been yesterday, is the answer to that question. But fundamentally from a funds perspective, it was difficult for us to do it. We need to really invest in that culturally, so that we need to know that when someone comes and joins us, they don't go straight on to working with us. They do spend a lot of time theoretically learning about the culture and what it meant. So when we brought our head of people on, Jess Davis, before lockdown, she went through a full module induction process, 30, 60, 90 for all of our staff. And it's evolving. So we had UK Barista champion Paul Ross with us for 14 or 15 months. He's off now to do his own entrepreneurial activity, which is great, and we hugely support that. But he came to us and also made some comments about, how do you, just little things like, we give a bag of coffee now to all of our new starters, which is printed with their names on as a thank you. We're now evolving that process as more, whereby every single person who joins the business, I will personally call that person for a phone call prior to their first day in WatchHouse to have a conversation with them, which I know sounds a bit grandiose because, well, CEO rings you, but the reality is when you have 200 plus employees, that's a lot of people, a lot of time to actually get around everybody. So actually speaking to them before they come to anywhere, any part of our business is a really important part as well, and just hearing about what they think and then following up with them in due course as well. So we give everybody brunch when they join us as well. There is a PDP plan in place, so they can go through SCA modules, coffee modules, if they're in the barista side of our business. Also management training and really bringing them through into the business and sort of cultivating your rising stars. So yeah, there's a load of things that we're doing and we are going to do. I think bringing the whole business to a London living wage was a big part of the Great Reassessment. I think was not only about culture, but it was also about economics. And I think you and I both expect that if we walk into a Pret a Manger tomorrow morning and your sandwich is 15 pence more than it was 6 months ago, you're probably not going to say anything because you understand that we're now in an inflationary period. Let's not even talk about Brexit or the horrific things we're seeing in the Ukraine at the moment. There's a lot of headwinds in the world right now, and therefore inflationary pressures are everywhere. And because of that Great Reassessment, we've managed to look and go, right, actually, where do we sit financially within this space, and how can we invest in our people? So it's fine to talk all these nice words, but are you going to put your money where your mouth is? So we brought everyone in our business up to a minimum of a London living wage a level. So everybody gets minimum London living wage, plus they get trunk service charge on top. So that was a really important part. Obviously, we're going through the B Corp process at the moment, which is a really exciting thing as well. And other things like mental health training. Again, going back to that point about making sure that we are being considerate to people in our business to ensure that they are looked after and cared for when they aren't well. So there's been loads of really great things coming out of the last 18 to 24 months culturally and economically as well. So putting those prices up basically helped us. It allowed us the opportunity to go, how are we going to make our business actually sustainable? Well, if we're going to do it, we need to charge properly. So it's slightly depressing to see people coming into the market still looking to try and go like race to the bottom. I think that's a shame because I think, obviously you're from Denmark, and I think Denmark's a great example of a place where if you pay good wages, everything is done with an element of empathy. And I think that's something that resonated with me when I went to Denmark. It was actually that feeling of actually things aren't cheap, but people live well and they're happy. And I think there's a lot to be said about that.
Yeah, and it's also about productivity. In principle, because also you start out thinking smarter about what you do in a business. You don't throw, for example, labor at a problem. Yeah, it's a very, very different approach. But exactly. That's a totally different conversation. I wanted to stay a bit about what you talk about here and then dive into that a bit. Like you talk about that thing where you send the baristas out there and part of these World Cups, and I know how hard it is to get into that from my coffee background. Sure. I think we had 1 or 2 people over our history, my 9 years in a coffee chain. It's almost that pursuit of mastery that comes from the outset, the perfection you talked about in the beginning. Like Michael Jordan also talks about standards. You can only, doesn't matter what others do, you need to beat your own standards every day, set higher. Can you talk a bit about that and why it's so important for you? And you said, are you really happy that you created an entrepreneur? Is another example of creating a business person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I have to say again, they always say about Mark Zuckerberg that his skill is hiring great people. That's his skill. He surrounds himself by fantastic people, Sheryl Sandberg, whatever. But he surrounds himself with great people. While we're clearly not at the same standard, I would say to you that my ability is similar in that I see people that I immediately know that they will be a value add in their respective space. And our head of coffee in this situation is a gentleman called Ryan Garrick, who joined us. We weren't even weighing in shots. We were not good when we first started. We were honest and we did good stuff and we made good revenue, but we weren't in a specialty way anywhere near certainly not where we are now. But he joined us at that point, and we didn't have a roastery. Obviously, we were talking about it, and he kind of doubled down with us, and now he's our head of coffee, soon to be coffee director in our business. We're restructuring as we go. He created, and he came from a sort of sports psychology background, so he created this. We used to refer to it as the Team Sky cycling approach, where there was 6 or 7 people that would be working towards competition. There'd be one person who maybe gets the lion's share of the support, because that's how the team ran in terms of Ryan being the coach, and then we'd have someone who was principally going to be the person going for the UKBCs. We managed to have 2 or 3 people at the same time without causing any sort of issues about conflict of interest, etc. But fundamentally, Ryan's created a really great career and competition, healthy competition within the coffee team, and therefore that means that creating those aspirational elements within our teams has been a really important part of the culture of the business. So we get people coming to us now who approach us because they want to be part of our competition team, and I don't know, I'm sorry if there's someone listening to this that can contradict me, and I hope they can in fact, but I don't know if there's another competition team within London doing what we're doing. We have a very, very tight-knit group of people who are focused upon mastery, as you say. I think it's a really good word, actually, and it's not one that we really use in our business, but I think it does encapsulate what we're trying to do. We're trying to be masters of what we do, and I think that's something that Ryan is particularly spearheaded.
What about that leads us then to something I think that's really interesting, is also because you're growing a business, and and you said that the commercial has to be right, so therefore the operational standards has to be spec on every day as you open and close that business. Also talk about you visit a brand in New York where that was not the case, and the culture is the foundation of great standards. How do you maintain them as you grow? Because especially when you have a premium product like you have.
It's so hard. It's so hard. It's so hard. I can't even tell you how difficult it is to do it. And I think, we've recently hired. So Steph's role originally in our business was operations director, and we very quickly realised both of us are very honest characters in ourselves. We're both very reflective about our own skill sets and what we aren't good at. And one of the things we haven't been strong at is that operationally, as a business, we don't come from a McDonald's vocational program or work for Nando's for 10 years. It's just not where we come from. So we wanted to ensure that we had that. But equally, I never wanted to bring in someone who was just, because what you tend to find with those operations, commercially fantastic, and they come so well drilled. But are they WatchHouse? Do they want to be best in class, or is it more about it's just not the same kind of comparable space? And we were super fortunate to find an operations director by the name of Damon Conn, who had previously he came to us from Marks and Spencer's, but prior to that he'd been in operations at Harrison Hall and Taylor Street Baristas before that, and he'd been in specialty. And he's Australian, which is also a massive tick, obviously, on the kind of specialty box. But he was an absolute game changer for our business, and came in and kind of went, right, what are we doing here? How do we do this? And we're still working on it. We're still trying to get our sort of NSO and new store opening team off the ground whilst we come out of COVID. But operationally, it's hard. One thing I will say on it, though, is that I tend to be probably the biggest critic of our stores. I go into them and there'll be something that's not right, whatever it may be. Luckily, the second most critical person is Damon, which is great because it's been a real revelation coming to get to know him, because I often get quite frustrated when I feel like people around me don't have the same aspiration towards perfection, which is also not realistic, but it's just who I am as a person. And luckily, Damon very much has that. So he does most of the QCing and operational training now for the company, and certainly in terms of standards training, he's exceptional at that. But yeah, the difficulty of that thing I always say to myself though is when I do find it difficult at times, if I go into a shop and I don't know, a point of sale is out of alignment, or the music is slightly too quiet or slightly too loud, what I think I come to realise is actually people don't have the same sensitivities towards your brand as much as you do, and therefore, as long as you are doing a very, very good job across most of your facets, people will be very, very happy, and therefore actually take it easy on yourself a little bit.
Yeah, so like Michael Jordan said, you're in competition with yourself, not the others. Mm-hmm. And you're touching on the customers or community, as I would like to call them. How do you build that? Because you have some loyal customers. I've noticed and talked with a couple of people that really said, "Yeah, that's my place. I'll go to there. I will go to WatchHouse in the morning. That's my
I'm glad to hear that.
Holy touch point of the day.
That's good.
How do you build that, and how do you actually maintain that connection, especially as you grow as well?
I honestly, listen, I came into this industry as a frustrated customer. I said that earlier on. I think if you are trying to solve that problem honestly and authentically, I've said that word a few times, but I want to repeat it. If you are opening up a hospitality brand and you want to do something truly great, be authentic. That is what you need to do. You need to write that on the top of on a piece of paper and put it on front of your wall and hold that out in front of you. Like, that is the most important thing. Be authentic, be honest, and be true. But I would say that if you do those things and you adhere to that, I think customers just know. I think they just realise that there is something here that's truly honest. And if you're doing a good product and you're trying to do good food and you're trying to do, the system or the environment in a good way, I think people start to realise that. So in terms of connecting, I guess, spiritually with our customer base, I think it's about making sure that when you're designing your house, as we refer to them, or if you're designing any of your systems or anything you're doing, if you're doing it with true empathy and authenticity, then I think people just know that intrinsically. I think in terms of more and less spiritually, but more just day to day, yes, we do we invest a fair amount of time and effort and resource into our marketing and our social media, and we connect with people. I make it a principle that every single house manager has to respond to any Google review, good or bad. But definitely the bad ones they're all over it very, very quickly, but also the nice ones. So if you go and click on any of our watch houses on Google, for example, you'll see every single of the 800 reviews on one of our houses would have been replied to. So there's the connectivity is very much built into the DNA of the business. We allow, we encourage, we definitely allow, but we encourage engagement from our house managers to our customers in terms of if they want something changed, if they want to make an amendment, they can do that. If there's an element of idiosyncrasy within a house, then by all means, let's lean into that and see where it takes us. And then obviously there's other things such as we've got an app which we use an awful lot for connectivity directly to customers, and I think now as we start to build out our direct-to-consumer business, which is a big part of our future, we'll have more of a digital engagement with them as well. I mean, I've spoken previously about things such as NFTs and tokens and things like that. I think I've probably become a bit more cynical about those as the last 6 months has gone on in terms of I don't want them to be, without sounding like a pun, a token. I don't want it to be a token thing. I want it to be something that's real and really engaged. So you won't be seeing WatchHouse launching NFT artworks for their walls. Like, that's not going to happen at our business, but you may see us in the near future look at doing a coin in which it can allow people additional qualitative access to, such as additional training resources or one-to-one training with our head baristas, or also additional benefits in terms of actually when they come into the store in terms of what they get as well. So there's different things that we're looking at doing in terms of connectivity with our community. We also hired, just finally on this point, we actually hired a community manager as well. Bit of a shout out to Faye. She was big part of the cultural piece actually of our business. She kind of came in and reluctant, both externally at what our community engagement was like, but also internally about what we were doing as well. And she was a big part of that cultural evolution. I was going to say revolution. It was kind of a revolution, but also an evolution as well within our business over the last 18 months.
And that's very counterintuitive. If you look at normal hospitality, it's very known in tech. You have your community manager that is involved with the community. YouTube is known for the story about building that, community from the straight out when they cocked up some of the setup of the tech, and all the heavy users just said, no, what the hell are you doing? And they captured that because they had a community manager that can come back with all that feedback and say, we need to change this because they're leaving us if we don't.
Yeah.
What is your prediction for hospitality? You went in with a bit of a disgruntled customer. This had to be better. But how do you see hospitality after the pandemic, which was a bit of a reset, many said, from a hospitality point of view?
I think that there's going to be... It's interesting because obviously it's so faceted. There's so many things we can talk about in that situation. I mean, in a more boring commercial way, obviously the price of things have gone up. I think they're going to go up certainly for the certainly for the medium term. I could think possibly for the long term as well. I think this race to the bottom within anything other than very, very cheap brands, I think that day is kind of over. Right, like one of the things I learned when I was doing, or as I'm doing my MBA, is like you kind of want to be at either ends of the scale. You either want to be a very cheap operator that does things super, super well, quick, buy it high and or pilot high, sell it cheap operator, or you want to be a operator in which you create such a diversion from your price point, your perceived and real value add that people are willing to pay. So I think what you're going to see here is possibly race to the bottom. Operators getting more efficient, getting a bit more predatory, but being successful. I think you'll also then see a premiumization within the space of more local heroes really stepping up and doing something that's a bit more special and investing properly in what they're doing. So, and therefore the quality will start to increase. I don't see hospitality as anything other than going in one way, which is in a positive way and up. I don't see people disappearing into the Zoom world. I never thought that. This whole notion of we're going into a new world is a load of rubbish as far as I'm concerned. The only new world I see is Tuesdays, Wednesdays and Thursdays being the new Fridays, or the old Fridays, and Mondays and Fridays being a bit quieter, but the weekend being absolutely jammed. So I think we're in a great space, and humans want humans. Like, we don't want tech. We just don't want it. And that'll never change as far as I'm concerned. And I think as long as we position our brand in a position where we have people and connectivity, authenticity and empathy at the very centre of what we do, I think we'll be in a good place.
If you should give one advice to other leaders out there, what should that be?
Yeah, I got asked that actually recently on a panel I was on, and sitting on a panel full of people, and everyone was kind of being quite reflective about the sort of the more modular parts of their business. I think the real key thing for leaders out there is to be really, really, really introspective about what you actually are doing. I keep on using that word human being. It's a bit odd but I think it kind of sobers the mind about what we are doing as people. Like we need to assess who we are as human beings, and actually what angle are we coming from and everything that we do, and then start from there and go again. And it's fine to do that after 30 years of being in business. Like, it doesn't need to be a spotty 18-year-old coming in doing that. You need to, in many ways you can't when you're that age. So actually having a bit of mileage on the clock really helps you have a proper introspection of who you are and reflection on how you can move forward as a better human being.
Where can people find out more about you, WatchHouse, coffee?
Yeah. So WatchHouse is obviously there's the usual social media channels, principally Instagram and Facebook. You can obviously reach out to us on via our website if you want to come and speak to us. Actually, I'd encourage anybody who wants to learn a bit more about business, if they want to reach out to me, I'm happy to have a conversation with you over a coffee, or even on Zoom if we have to. So preferably over a coffee if we can. So there would be the ways of contacting us, but by all means try and do it in person, because that's what we like.
Thank you so much for joining us today and sharing the journey and all the great things you're doing and all the reflection.
Pleasure. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Roland, for your great insights and ideas on how to build a business that aspires to be best in class and gives more than it takes. You should now reflect on how can I make sure my business becoming better every day and becomes the best in class. To get further inspiration on how to build business that both delivers business results and impact, tune in to episode number 151 with Will Beckett, CEO of Hawksmoor, on teaching skills, not techniques. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please share, rate, review, or subscribe to one of our channels, which all can be done via the website hospitalitymavericks.com. A big thank you to BizSimply for supporting us, bringing great insights, strategies, and tools to help the industry thrive, not just survive. Check them out at bizsimply.com or via their social on BizSimply or BizSimplyHQ. You can also email them directly at advice@bizsimply.com. A big thank you to Phoenix Charlson, who is the show producer and editor from the podcast collective. Tune in next time for another interview, and in the meantime, find out more about us and subscribe to the newsletter and more Maverick insights at hospitalitymavericks.com. And don't worry, if you didn't get all of this, there will be links in the show notes. I'm Michael Tingsager, and you've been listening to the Hospitality Maverick podcast show. Be Maverick.